Hi, I'm Stephen Sklar, and this is Oceanside High School's first edition of Bracketology. Let's start off by introducing everyone at the table. All the way to my right is Mr. Manning, played in the D3 March Madness tournament for Union College a couple of years ago. 2-3 years ago?
About there.
Yeah.
A couple years ago.
To my immediate right is head coach Supple, head coach of the varsity basketball team. He's no stranger to the screen. And all the way to my left, or to my immediate left, is the track coach, Mr. Howley, behind the scenes on all the coaches' corners. We felt bad for him. He really has no credibility or any reason to be at this table, but we'll see what he has to say. So we'll go right into it. Virginia has arguably been the best regular season team over the course of the last couple of seasons, but they've failed to do anything when it came to March and April. What do you envision them doing so far this year? What do you envision them doing in the tournament this year? I'll start with Mr. Manning.
First, Steve, thanks for having me on the show. I'm actually a fan of what you've been doing with the podcast, and I'm happy that you finally have some talent here in your podcasting show. It's been long overdue.
Yes.
Now, your question with Virginia, I actually love a story in the NCAA tournament, and I think the fact that they got beat last year in the first round is the motivation that they need to make a run all the way to the Final Four. So I know we'll get into it later, but Virginia is the only one seed I have going all the way to the Final Four.
All right, Mr. Supple.
I actually agree there with Coach Manning. I have Virginia making a nice run this year. We'll get to those picks later, but I think they have the personnel this year that changes. Offensively has been their issue the last few years. They're always a top defensive team in the country. I think they have a legitimate star player in DeAndre Hunter this year. They're fourth in the country in three-point percentage. I think they have what it takes to make a better run this year.
Right, they have Kyle Guy leading the charge beyond the arc. Mr. Howley?
Yeah, I got to agree with Mr. Manning. It's good we brought in the talent because it's tough to. The story is great. I mean, UMBC's Twitter feed blew up from that 16 win last year. So Virginia's been walking around with that chip on their shoulder, I would think, for 360-something days, getting ready to just get right back into it. So they did all the work unsung like throughout the entire year. I think they're out to make a point, but I don't think it's that easy. I think it's going to be tough to get over that hump.
Now, Virginia is one of 3 ACC teams to take a #1 spot in the bracket. They're joined by North Carolina, Duke, and the other #1 seed is Gonzaga. Did the committee get the 1 seeds right? We'll start to my left this time with Mr. Howley.
Yeah, that's always a question that I don't really I don't put too much concern in it. Maybe some other people do. I think they did for the most part. I have no issues with it. 3 from the same conference people talk about, but that's the best conference basketball-wise this year. If you're a 2 seed and you got a gripe, then play your way through it and make it happen. I will say I did hear people mention, if Duke is the overall #1 seed, getting Michigan State at the bottom of that bracket to see later is something that they didn't do them any favors with that. Izzo's one of the best coaches come March, but that gives us something to look for. There's nothing like a Coach K Izzo matchup to watch if that's where the chalk falls in that bracket. That'd be a fun game to watch.
Now, you brought up Michigan State. I want to shift the conversation a little bit. They both find themselves as 2 seeds, obviously in the same half of the bracket. That's not really the concern. Why didn't one of them get a 1 seed nod? Coach Supple?
I think Michigan State was the only other team that had an argument to get a 1 seed after their win yesterday. But I think when you go back to those Virginia, North Carolina, Duke games, they obviously took into consideration the low point of Duke's season was without their best player and the best player in the country in Zion Williamson. So I think they took that into consideration when making them the #1 overall. But I think most of us would agree that if you put them all in an 8-team bracket, that those 3 are probably the best 3 teams in the country, not including Gonzaga there.
You agree?
Yeah, Michigan State, I think, is the strongest 2 in the field. In fact, I have Tom Izzo cutting down the nets at the end of this tournament, which I think...
Spoiler.
Yeah, Tom Izzo is a great tournament coach. I think they look strong in the Big Ten tournament, and I think Duke is in for it if they should meet in the Elite 8 round.
Yeah, and I really do think that's one of the underlooked factors going into March and going into April is experience and the been there, done that mentality. We're going to see, well, in my bracket especially, that there's a couple of those teams that I don't think a lot of people would have picked, but I'm going to pick because of that. Next question. Every year we see a 5-12 upset. What are some of the 5-12 upsets you guys have, or some of the bigger upsets that might lead into the Elite 8 or the Final Four? We'll go with Coach Supple this time.
It's funny, that 12-5 thing, I think this year can really hold true because I think there's multiple 12s that can win. I think the most popular one people pick is Oregon, and I actually think they're opening up the game as favorites, which is a little different as a 12 seed. But the one I like the best, and maybe just because it's the best matchup, I love the Murray State-Marquette matchup. I think John Morant's one of the top 3 or 4 players in the entire country. Him and Marcus Howard will have a great matchup in that first 12-5 game, and that's probably the game I'm looking forward to seeing the most. So it'll be entertaining.
Well, Marquette, aside from Marcus Howard, has the ability to stretch the floor. They have really good three-point shooters. Just a quick question. Who do you have winning that game?
I picked Murray State. I think John Morant has a little chip on his shoulder as well. He's a forgotten superstar in college. You hear about R.J. Barrett, you hear about Zion Williamson. I think he's going to go out to try and really put on a show, and I think he pulls it out.
And you also mentioned, of course, the Wisconsin-Oregon game. Wisconsin has been on a bad stretch to end the season. We'll see if that carries over into the tournament.
Steve, can I throw in a not so fast, my friend?
Sure, yeah.
A little college game day. Not so fast, my friend.
I'll be sure to throw that up on the bottom of the screen.
I love the John Morant, Marcus Howard matchup. That's my game. Cannot miss in day one. But you heard it here first. The one Duke Blue Devil that's going to be in the Final Four this year, Steve Wojciechowski. Marquette is going to run the table, come out of the West bracket, and they are going to make the Final Four. And you remember you heard that, Sklar, because you finally invited me on the show, and I'm giving you that piece of information. My favorite stat of the tournament, Marcus Howard, when he's playing ranked opponents, he's averaging 30 points a game.
Game time.
Wow.
Big East Player of the Year, big time.
And I love guard play in the tournament. Wojo smacking the floor from the coaching bench. Takes them to the Final Four.
Well, I will say I do have them in my Elite 8. I don't know if anyone else has them going as far as Mr.
You
Manning
gotta love
does.
the Golden Eagles, though. You gotta love the uniforms and the way he played. Tore up the Johnnies when he saw him every time. So I like that. Yeah, I don't see Murray State pulling it out. I'm gonna go with New Mexico State just because it's not football season. Auburn they're in the wrong bracket there. But I mean, if you look at any of these teams, the great thing about the 5-12, it sounds like such a big upset. Those teams are just evenly matched teams. They're just good basketball teams. And as the years have gone on, the play has gotten better in those games. It just makes them so fun to watch. Liberty is also something to look out for. I don't know that Mississippi State, closed well, but honestly, those games are just they're pick 'em games almost at this point now.
Yeah, the 12-5 almost is not fun to pick anymore because it happens every year. So I got a better one for you. You ready? Yale over LSU.
I have the same thing.
Yale, and not only that, I'll do you one better. They're going to win 2 games.
2 games.
They're going to beat Maryland in the next round. The Bulldogs, they not only read, they not only write, and they're not only good students, but they could ball.
Please tell me you have them going down to MSU.
Not so fast, my friend. Belmont's got something to say about everything that you just said, and they got to play early. It's going to be tough to come out of the play-in games or not the play-in game, the first-round game. But no, I think Belmont has got a backcourt that was made for March. I don't think Maryland's ready to take them on. They had, Big Ten is not the same type of basketball season when they used to be in the ACC. Belmont takes care of business with Temple early on. They go to Maryland. Belmont's the one that's going over LSU. Yale Bulldogs, they can go home and study.
I think the biggest upset I have is UC Irvine. I think they have a chance to beat Kansas State in that first round. Sleeper team, very good guard play, like Coach Manning talked about. I think guard play wins a lot in the tournament. I think they're going to be a sleeper.
Well, here's my not so fast. Kansas State, last year, they went into the bracket without their star player, Dean Wade. They made it all the way to the Elite 8. This year, Dean Wade's coming off of his injuries, but he's probably going to be back limited minutes to start. I think that the addition of him is actually going to take Kansas State all the way into the Final Four against UNC. It's a bit of a spoiler, but that does kind of lead me into my next question. What does your Final Four look like? We'll start again to my left with Mr. Howley.
Yeah, that's actually a tough question. I have, I get tough every year, but I do have some chalk. I've got 2 ACC teams. I got Duke, UNC on opposite corners of the bracket, taking care of business through there. Duke's the #1 seed overall. I think they make it to Final Four. Coach K's teams do not tend to underperform in the tournament. UNC gets an easy game against Iona, not because Iona is a good team. I'd root for Iona against anybody, but Iona likes to play up and down, but nobody plays up and down better than UNC. Then we're going to go to what I'm really pulling for the whole way is Gonzaga. They're going to come out and have to face up against Coach K, but Nova is going to be the sleeper out of the South. That bracket is wide open for anybody who wants to take it. I'm going to go with Jay Wright. Been there before. His players have been there before. They just know what to do. They work hard, and no one is going to outwork them when they get on the basketball court.
But they do play another experienced team in Tennessee. They're under veteran leadership, maybe not necessarily on the court.
I didn't know Tennessee had already won 2 games. That's interesting.
Coach Supple?
I think I'm going to go with Duke as well. I think they're the most talented team in the country. I think that'll get them to the Final Four. I think that lack of experience will cost them. We'll talk about that after, once they get there. I'm going to go with who I think is maybe the best offensive team in the country in Gonzaga. I think their leadership and their style gets them all the way there. I am going to go with Virginia. I think, like I said earlier, this is a year where they put it together on the offensive end and they're able to carry themselves to the Final Four. I think Coach Bennett makes a run this year. And I'm going to go with Kentucky. I'm going to make Kentucky, I'm going to say their athleticism. Reed Travis, as a fifth-year senior transfer from Stanford, I think has changed them on the inside. And I think him in the paint is going to be trouble for a lot of teams. I'm going with Kentucky.
I like that
Now,
choice.
before we move on to Mr. Manning, you brought up Gonzaga. Does anyone here have St. Mary's upsetting Villanova?
I do not.
I do not.
If St. Mary's had taken and a team that was not as tournament tested, I'd love St. Mary's.
Yeah.
But I think they run into a tough task against Villanova.
All
right.
right. Jay
Mr.
Wright's too good in the tournament for Villanova to
He's
get
not going to
upset.
sleep on him, yeah.
Yeah.
Final Four?
Final Four, one, let me say, I think Howley's been running too much outside in circles because the weather's getting to him. I don't know where that Final Four came from. And I love Kentucky too, but Kentucky goes down to Warford in the second round. They have one of the best three-point shooters in the country. But I gave a little peek at my Final Four before, but I'll just review it again here. Michigan State takes down Duke. Duke shooting below 30% from the three-point line.
Yes.
No team has gone to the Final Four that has done that.
And Kentucky's team, Coach K's teams rather, never are that poor shooters. They are always deadly from the outside.
Although as great as they are, they also have two guys that dominate the scoring. That's not a good sign to get into the Final Four. So Michigan State with Tom Izzo cutting down the nets. I got Marquette. That's my really sleeper Final Four pick there with Steve Wojciechowski. I have Houston coming out of the Midwest. They won, 31 games now. I think they get hot into the tournament with Warford taking down Kentucky. I think that helps them in the Midwest. And Virginia, my lone number one seed. Virginia, Michigan State in the finals. Tom Izzo cuts down the nets, 68-64.
Also, to mention with Duke, they're not the greatest free throw shooters. Two guys on that team are pretty average, pretty average at the line. RJ Barrett and Zion also happens to be their two best shooters. When it gets later into the game and they have to make those clutch free throws, it's going to be, you're going to want to know whether they're going to hit them.
A lot of weekend, little weak spots.
All right, so who moves on? Who wins? We'll start with you, Mr. Howley.
Well, I'll go with, if you're not going to be there for the engagement, don't be there for the wedding. I've always loved Gonzaga. We've been watching him out there for 20 years. I'm picking with my heart more than I am with my head, which is why I'm not a good gambler. But I think that they've been there. They got to the Final Four already, so they've jumped that hump. There's one more to go. I want to be there. I want to see the Zags cutting down the nets come April.
My mom will appreciate that pick. Coach Supple.
Well, I have Gonzaga playing University of Virginia. I have them going to the finals. I think Gonzaga beats Duke because of what we talked about. I think unless Cam Reddish has a monster tournament, I don't think they have a chance to win in the Final Four. So I have Gonzaga versus Virginia, and I think after we talked about that little monkey on their back from last year and then being eliminated in the ACC tournament, I have Virginia, all right, beating Gonzaga 79-74.
All right,
Yeah,
Mr. Manning.
you heard it here before. Michigan State cuts down the net.
Michigan State. So my Final Four, Duke coming out of the East, Texas Tech coming out of the West. I'm going to have KSU, Kansas State coming out of the South, and I'm going to have UNC coming out of the Midwest. Really, Texas Tech is one of those picks that I don't think a lot of people are going to make, but I really like Jarrett Culver and what he's done this season. I'd like to see them go up against Duke, give them a bit of a run for their money in that left half of the bracket. Any final remarks before we cut the tape?
Yeah, your bracket's really going to get busted when Texas Tech gets beat by Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Buffalo. I like the Bulls.
Buffalo wins 2 games this year.
Yep, agreed.
I actually agree with Coach Manning. I think Buffalo might be one of the most fun teams to watch in the tournament, so your Texas Tech is going to struggle.
One sec. I just realized that I didn't even say my winner.
Did you write that in pen or pencil?
That's in pen.
You're locked in.
I'll write over it in Sharpie.
Good luck with that.
You knew your bracket had no chance. You didn't even give us a winner.
I will tell you my
The
winner.
winner's already going to be out.
I'm gonna have Duke and UNC playing each other in the final with a final score of 79-78. I said it before. I think experience carries teams a lot. I think it carries them a long way. They got a big three dominated by experienced players, Cameron Johnson and Luke May. So I will consider them the favorite to come out of the tournament cutting down the nets. And your closing remarks?
Parting shots. We're sitting here on March 18th. Just had St. Patrick's Day. Everything's thawing out. Spring is around. Think about the weeks that we have in store for us right now. There's nothing like the tournament. St. Patrick's Day just finished up. We're done with the soda bread. Moving on to the Madness this weekend. We're going to have a great time coming back and rehashing all the things that we just got wrong. And then after that, opening day kicks off for the baseball teams. We start doing that. My team's still undefeated, so I love that. And then from that, April 14th, Game of Thrones. Follow that. Avengers Endgame on April 26th. This is going to be a fun 5 weeks.
Great spring.
I'm excited for the ride.
You skipped
Let's
over
bring
the
it off.
Masters.
You can throw in a little bit
Did
something for
skip over
everybody.
the Masters.
Yeah, that's all good.
4 days of golf. Couldn't be happier.
Not the same excitement as the Madness, but it is another sign of spring. It's a great time of year. I'm looking forward to the next
Absolutely.
couple weeks.
Absolutely. Anything else from you
I'll
two?
come back for the Game of Thrones podcast if you want to have it.
That's not me. That's Tristan.
Yeah,
That's
back.
Tristan.
I'm in for that one
So
as
talk
well.
to him.
it's all good.
Best weekend of the basketball season coming up.
Definitely.
Really looking forward to it.
Agreed.
All right. I'm Stephen Sklar. This has been the first edition of Oceanside High School's Bracketology. Thank you.